Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Got really quiet here. Happy birthday, dear the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Happy 43rd birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Had to tell him the age too, didn't you?
Yeah, well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No secrets here. It is the man in the hat's birthday, and where else would you rather be than right here in beautiful Orlando, Florida for UFC on Fox 17? Am I right? This is what you wish for, right?
I just want to be home, man. Eating some cake. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is cool. I would rather be here, man. This is cool.
Well, happy birthday to you. Let's talk some fights, of course. This is the MMAfighting.com UFC on Fox 17 preview show. We're just hours away now. It's headlined, of course, by Rafael Dos Anjos versus Donald Cerrone for the UFC lightweight title. Co-main event, Alistair Overeem versus Junior Dos Santos, a fight that is 3.5 years in the making. They're actually filming a show right over there. They're not cheering for us, but let's pretend like there is a crowd here.
I was pretending.
Okay, so we just wrapped up the weigh-ins, and you saw RDA, you saw Donald. Of course, a lot of talk in this USADA era about new physiques and whatnot. What did you learn from what we saw from RDA here?
Well, I wasn't at UFC 185, but just from the eye test, he does look a little different. Now, that doesn't, I don't know what that means exactly. I don't want to make accusations, but he does look like he's a little bit different. He doesn't look as defined as he did before. Who knows, man? I think that Donald Cerrone, this fight will tell us a lot. Obviously, we've seen him fight Donald Cerrone, and we saw what he did to Pettis. So I feel like maybe if we see a different RDA out there, maybe that'll fill us in on what's going on.
And of course, that's a question, in my opinion, worth asking, because Donald has accused him of all kinds of things leading up to this fight. And then in turn, RDA accused Donald. There's been a lot of gamesmanship back and forth. And like I said, RDA has a win over Donald Cerrone in August of 2013. But I think it's safe to say, even more so, which is somewhat surprising, than RDA, I feel like Donald has turned into a completely different fighter. He's won 8 in a row. Would you agree?
It's funny, man, because he did this once before, a couple years ago, where he won, what was it, 6 or 7 in a row, and then had that come to a crashing halt and sort of, was it Diaz? I think it was Diaz who ended his run, and he was trying to cram in all those fights that year. But I do feel like he's different. I feel like he's different wired. It's almost like he went back and he thought about it. And I know he admitted to you on your show that he does think about the belt, but it's almost like he had to downplay that, put it out of his mind for a while, and play tricks with himself a little bit to get to the point where his mentality was right to make this next run. And he's done a great job, man. I mean, he's looked amazing, about as amazing you can possibly look through that run. And a lot of guys, it's hard to get up for guys that are less than you on this, but they're good fighters. Miles Jury, those kind of guys, he walked right through them, and it's a big tribute to him, man. I think he's a different fighter. He's a hungry fighter. He's got his grandma out here. He wants to hand her that belt. That's going to be I think we're going to see probably the best Donald Cerrone we've seen.
And what a journey it has been for Donald Cerrone, and I'm not just talking about the winning streak. He started this journey to get to Orlando from Albuquerque, took his RV to Dallas, took a flight from Dallas to Las Vegas to do Media Day last week, then took a flight from Las Vegas to New Orleans, picked up his RV there in New Orleans, but then it broke down in Alabama. He fixed it himself and then drove here to Orlando, and after all that, he was still the first fighter to check in. It's amazing how he could do all this stuff before the biggest fight of his career. One of a kind.
He is one of a kind. Remember at UFC 150 when he was getting ready to fight Melvin Guillard, and he was like staying out by the lake out there, like with his RV. He's from Denver area. Like, he's got plenty of places to stay, but doesn't want to stay in a hotel. He just thinks differently. I think he's one of those guys who probably does, psychologically he thinks about a fight, and it probably bothers him on some level, so he handles it the way he handles it. And good for him, man. I love the characters in this game, and he's definitely one of them.
It's also a very unique title fight, in my opinion, because it feels like both men are kind of searching for legitimacy. Donald has never won the belt, never fought for the belt. Yeah. He's been there, he's been close, never got in WEC either, and he's always said, as you alluded to, that the belt meant nothing, but finally yesterday he admitted it means something to him. And then you have RDA, maybe the most disrespected champion in recent UFC history. He beats Anthony, and no one kind of really believes that he's a champion. So it almost feels like he has to win this fight to prove to people that he's the real champion, right?
It's true. It's true. That's exactly how it feels for me. I've just kind of catching the way people have talked about this fight. It feels like that in general. I felt a little bad for him watching him on the scale. He's up there and he's saying, want to get out there and do a good performance. But, I felt all the love in the room was kind of directed at Donald Cerrone. It's going to be an interesting atmosphere. But I will say this, man. If RDA looks great, I think you got to give it to him, man. You got to say, like, that guy's for real. And we got to start talking about him in a different level. I think that what he did to Pettis and really throughout his last 10 fights, I think he only has that one loss, and it's just, he's obviously a very skilled fighter. I just feel like we'll get a lot of answers come Saturday night.
Do you think this fight is going to play out like the one that we saw around 2.5 years ago?
I don't think so. I mean, to me, Cerrone has really shown a lot of different wrinkles. I mean, it's kind of cliche at this point, but he really has. He used to kind of get nicked up a little bit early. That Melvin fight we were talking about a little bit ago, I remember him getting hurt, and you thought, oh my God, Melvin's going to win this thing, and then he turned the tables on him. He sort of does that a little bit. But I don't feel like we've seen that guy as much. Daddy Alvarez won a little bit. He came out, and he was getting beat up in that one before he turned it around. I don't know. I feel like he might just set the tempo in this one. I don't know why, if it's just a hunch or something, but I don't. Technically, I think he's just he's been sort of around. You know, he's been training with great crew out there in Albuquerque, and I feel like he's really put some things together, takedown defense all the way through. So I feel like we're going to see a different Donald Cerrone, and I just think he's hungrier. That's just my sort of feel of being out here.
So you're picking him?
I'm going to pick Cerrone, but
wow.
I don't know. I know that you like to know exactly when, and I don't like to get too specific, but I will say 237 of round 2.
Wow.
TKO.
Okay. For a second, I was going to tell you I decide how you make the pick, but
okay.
you gave me exact time and second. Wow, that is very impressive. I will agree with you. It does feel like he's conquered the mental side of the game. And we saw that in the Nate Diaz fight, UFC 141, where it felt like the pre-fight antics got to him. Now that's no longer the case. So Donald Cerrone finally getting a chance to fight for the UFC lightweight title. In the co-main event, we have a fight that we've been talking about for 3.5 years. They were supposed to fight at UFC 146. It's Junior Dos Santos versus Alistair Overeem, but now there's a twist. Back then, Overeem wasn't training with Jackson Wink. Now he is. Back then, Junior Dos Santos wasn't training with ATT. Now he is. But also, I got to say, just looking at the weigh-ins, no accusations here. Both men look drastically different up there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I noticed this too. Again, I mean, it's just a weird era. This tells you about the weird era it is. I mean, you don't want to like sit here and make accusations because that's why they're doing these tests. But yes, I did notice a difference.
Okay, so who do you like going into this fight? Because I think, you know, in a weird way, there's more questions about JDS. He hasn't fought in a year. He's taken a lot of damage over the last couple fights, but he's been very inactive. The Stipe fight, he was beaten up, even though he came out with a close win. The Velasquez fight before that, beaten up as well. I'm still kind of wondering which JDS, and if he's taken too much damage. What are you thinking?
Same thing you are. He has gotten really beaten up at his last couple of fights, and you wonder, his chin has really held up, but you wonder, can he take those punches? And if he takes anything big from Alistair Overeem, especially early, we're going to know right away, like, you know what's going on with it with his chin, if he's able to sort of keep withstanding that type of punishment. I don't agree with the line. Somebody was telling me that the line is really stacked for JDS. To me, this is a fight like, I think JDS has more skills, obviously. I think he could win this game if he's able to control it, but man, those body kicks and those body shots by Alistair Overeem, if he's able to get something early, this could be an early night. You know, he could put away JDS. It should be a really interesting fight. It is interesting. I was sort of thinking about that. You know, here we are at a co-main event, and we have been talking about this fight for so long, and there's been so many iterations of these guys since that time, just kind of going in and out of different fights. But Alistair Overeem particularly, you know, he went through such a rough patch. Now he's won 2 in a row, and I guess he's a free agent. I mean, there's so many different things to consider in this fight. He's gambling on himself like the last couple cards, and this is a hell of a gamble. So it'll be really interesting under these new stakes how this thing plays out.
Yeah, this has become a new trend in our sport. We saw it recently with Benson Henderson. Last week we saw it with Aljamain Sterling. This week with Alistair Overeem. By the way, what do all 3 of those have in common? They're all managed by the same guy, Malki Kawa, so a little trend brewing over there. But yes, as you mentioned, this is the last fight for Alistair Overeem. He's going to this fight, and in my opinion, the stakes have now just been raised. And it makes the fight more interesting as a fan because he's sort of doubling down on himself. He's saying, I'm going to talk about the contract afterwards. If he wins, gosh, I mean, his stock is pretty high. And also, you know that there's another guy over there in San Jose that's a pretty big fan of his as well. They've done business together back in the day. So to me, this makes the fight even more interesting.
Free agency is one of those things. Every time you know a guy's contract is coming up, you almost expect him to perform better. It's just like there's this extra motivation behind this. I feel like it's been sort of the same in our small sample size we've seen over the last couple of fight cards, I guess, with Benson Henderson and Aljamain Sterling. I mean, I felt like you're getting great versions of those guys, so it'll be real interesting. And he's just an interesting guy in general because, you know, he kind of had fights won and then he found a way to lose them. I mean, almost in his UFC career. You see the size difference now. I mean, there's just so many question marks going on with Alistair Overeem on this one. Hopefully,
who's your pick?
I think I'm going to go JDS even after all this. I'm going to go JDS. I just think that in the end he'll just have too much skill, and he's obviously he can hit. If he lands one of those overhands, I mean he could put him out pretty quick. He's also very quick to pounce in those situations. That's sort of the way I'm envisioning it.
So you think a finish?
I think so, yeah.
Wow. All right, another big fight. It is the return of the 209's own Nathan Diaz, who, by the way, stole the show at Thursday's open workout. He got a glimpse of the poster, realized that he's not on the poster, drew himself on the poster with a 8-pack, by the way, and was in incredibly good spirits. Also, in my opinion, stole the show Friday morning when they were checking weights at the hotel, got into a bit of an altercation with Michael Johnson. It's good to have him back, right? But I got to say, last year in Phoenix, missed weight against RDA. That was his last fight. We haven't seen him for a year. Missed weight, as I said, was kind of surly. Yeah. It seems like a completely different Diaz this time around.
Totally different. It's funny with him, man, is because he mixes up everything with his what he's happy about, his gratitudes, with his what he's dismayed with. It's all in one big flow, you know. And so he shows up here and he's chipper, he's happy, but he's still sort of like ripping the UFC for not putting him on the poster and everything. He just can't help it. He can't help himself, but it's fun. Every time these guys fight. I know you were talking to Nick Diaz, his brother, too, yesterday, and it's just fun to see those guys.
Yes.
Fight week is always different. The weigh-ins become more special because you're not sure. There might be an altercation. You know, the guy in his jeans with his arms way out there. You never know who's going to get in whose face. You never know if there's an encounter in the lobby like what happened here. You know, what's going to happen. But in general, man, those guys have just been pure entertainment. And it's funny. I wrote a column that'll come out tomorrow, but I was saying, you know, Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz too, but Nate Diaz particularly is one of those guys who can show up with one win in 3.5 years and wonder why there's not a red carpet at his feet.
Sure.
And we all sort of be like, why isn't there a red carpet? No. Nobody else could do that. I mean, not very many guys can do that. So it's fun to see him back in there, and you always realize it when you see those guys, just sort of the star power they have, because they're pure fighters. You know, they're very sincere guys, and they're real fighters.
Also, dare I say, he's a needle mover, right? It just seems like even if you look at like web traffic, TV ratings, he could still, he could be on that skid, but people still care about him.
He headlined the media day. I mean, ultimately they had everybody come in. The last place was for Nate Diaz, and everybody's waiting around for that one, right? So it just kind of gives you an idea of his magnetism, and him and his brother. I mean, they have the same thing. It's just the exact same thing, and he never disappoints. I mean, I know you interviewed him yesterday, and his drawing on there. It's always so fun to kind of let him ramble and talk about his music and talk about everything that's going on, and just kind of get in their headspace for a little bit, because it's always an interesting thing.
And of course, I failed to mention his opponent. That's the Black Zillion's own Michael Johnson, who was on an impressive winning streak himself before he met Beneil Dariush in August. Lost a very controversial fight to Dariush, split decision. A lot of people believe that Johnson, including Johnson, deserved to win that fight. So what are you expecting to see out of this fight? Because there is a case to be made that Nate Diaz has not evolved over time. Like, he sort of hit a plateau. Do you agree with that assessment? And if so, does that mean you think Michael Johnson is going to win this fight?
Well, I think he's definitely, if you look at his last 4 fights, I mean, he's went 1-3, beat Gray Maynard, but Gray's had a rough patch as well. I would agree with it to an extent, you know. I mean, I think he's always been a guy who likes to stand and bang. He doesn't make any qualms about that, but we know he can do it on the ground as well. But I don't feel like he's made tremendous strides. I don't think that it's been a big, I don't want to discount it, but I don't think it's been a big, major emphasis to change his style. I think he is who he is, like the Diaz brothers both are. But maybe guys are catching up to that a little bit. This is an interesting style matchup going against Michael Johnson, who's one of those guys who I think is finally realizing his potential. We saw him coming, and he stumbled a couple of times, but now he's there, except for Dariush, which he should be riding a 5-fight winning streak. But really interesting. I suppose if Diaz comes out and really shows himself again, how it would be great for Diaz. It would be great for Nate, because suddenly it'd be like, well, all that other stuff doesn't matter. But it's going to be a tough test for him.
Your pick?
I'd still lean toward Michael Johnson in the end.
Big favorite, by the way.
Yeah, he is a big favorite. It's crazy, though, that you have to think about it, because everybody knows what Nate can do. I mean, we saw what he did to Cowboy Cerrone that one time. I mean, it's just, you never know if he feels good in there and he gets that volume going, he gets his flow going, and he figures out that range a little bit, and can stuff some takedowns and just kind of keep the fight where he wants it. I think that, you know, who knows? But I still think Michael Johnson. I'm going to go with the decision on that.
And we tend to forget this, but last week in Las Vegas, Tony Ferguson, one of the stars of the weekend, recently lost to Michael Johnson. A couple of years ago, it's his only loss, and then he went on that winning streak. So Michael Johnson's still very much a player at 155 pounds. Kicking off the main card on Fox, it's Randa Marcos against somewhat of an unknown Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And, she is undefeated, but if you watch Invicta, has a nice win over Mizuki Inoue. Like I said, 7-0 from Poland. I won't make you break it down too much, but who's your pick in that one?
I'm going to go, just based on what I've seen of Marcos, I think I got to go with Randa. I think she's so quiet. You almost feel like she's, not going to show up as well as she does in the cage, but she's a hard out. So I just think that she's going to be too much. But I'm sort of speculating because I have not seen a ton of Carolina's fights. But I think Randa's kind of shown, against some pretty good competition that she can hang in there.
Okay. Any other fights you want to mention before you go? I'm tossing you a softball here. Anyone else on the undercard, FS1 prelims, Fight Pass prelims?
I was trying to think. There's a couple of. Well, of course, the poet Nick Lentz. I think you got to talk about Nick Lentz in a situation like this. He looked great on the scale.
How about that man bun?
I don't know.
That beard.
You see his
the
palm?
sunglasses.
Oh
Yes.
my! Oh my! Yeah.
I almost feel like someone else may have written. Nah, like that wouldn't be. He wouldn't do that, right?
I'm not sure. You know how the sport goes.
Yeah.
You never know who's doing what.
But it's a very good undercard as well. Miles Jury making his debut at 145 pounds against Charles Oliveira. How about this one that just came together in a matter of days? Kaufman versus Shevchenko. Shevchenko, by the way, a relatively unknown fighter, 11-1 in MMA, something like 56-1 in Muay Thai.
65.
Yeah, I see like 400 different variations of her record.
Or 30. I'm not sure. It's one of those.
Yeah, something like that. But this is important to note. In 2006, 2007, and 2008, she defeated the current UFC strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk in Muay Thai. So that's very interesting as well. It's a great card here in Orlando, Florida. It kicks off Saturday afternoon at the Amway Center. Or is it the Amway Arena?
It's just the Amway.
It's just the Amway. Let's just call it the A. How about that? We're done. The birthday boy is about to get buck wild here in the Big O.
Drinking them up, baby.
Yes.
No, probably not.
No.
But I am going to the basketball game. So.
Okay. Check him out there. Look out for the infamous man in the hat. We're done from here. Thank you for watching our coverage the past couple of days, and stay tuned for more on Fight Night. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you Saturday night.